The second most common question that everyone asked was, what are the sources for our practice? What is our practice really based upon? I would say first and foremost, without question, the foundation for my practice and everything we do here at the Great River Taoist Center in our Academy of Chinese Swordsmanship is based on direct lineal transmission of the Yangjia Miquan Taiji Jian system from Wang Yanyin and from the public Yangshe Taiji Jian from Titi Liang. Now, when I say direct lineal transmission, I'm not meaning just the form. Many people, pretty much everybody practicing Chinese martial arts, have learned one system or another of Chinese swordsmanship with the Jian, with Dao, with a two-handed saber. Forms are not uncommon at all. What I'm talking about is the use of the sword, the basic cuts, not just what are the basic cuts, how are they used, what are their targets, what's a good follow-up from one to the other, the most common, easy to use examples. So I might go from a P cut to a Dian, for example, in movements like this. So we're talking about the direct martial applications and how to train those martial applications for use facing another swordsman. So when we're talking about lineal transmission, we don't just mean the form, we mean everything that's involved with learning sword practice. So this is a living tradition. This is not like HEMA. The stuff that the guys have done in the HEMA world is really amazing. They've dug up old manuals, translated them, put them into modern languages, into modern English, and rebuilt practices from that. That's an amazing bit of work that they've done. It's quite a lot of work that they've done. This is not at all like HEMA. This is a living tradition that has been passed on, right? And so we do certainly use manuals. I have translated a number of old manuals myself, and they are interesting and they help to inform our practice, but our practice is not based solely on manuals. Our practice is also based on handling antique weapons, and that has been a really big benefit that I've found for myself. When you handle Qing and even some Ming period weapons, you get to see how does that weapon like to move? What's the balance point? What's the weight of the weapon? What's the rigidity of the weapon? Is it solid or is it springy? And you get to learn all these kinds of things and experience it directly from a weapon that was used during either the Qing dynasty or even during the Ming. That greatly informs your practice because you can tell a lot about how a weapon was used, how it wants to move when you handle it, as opposed to just seeing a picture in the book. So it's very, very useful to handle the period weapons, the real antique weapons. Totally changed my practice, really gave it the information that I needed. One other very important foundation to our practice is test cutting. When I first really began my sword practice in earnest with Wang Yanyin, he explained that in the past, Chinese cut cao ren, grassmen, and that this was important to being able to understand how to cut. In those days, absolutely nobody test cut with Chinese swords. So I thought, Laoshi said this is important, I better start doing it, and I went out and started cutting. And that really changes your practice. Imagine somebody says, I want to learn to be a great marksman. And all they do is take a model of a gun and practice breathing exercises. And very carefully take aim and squeeze the trigger and do some elaborate form where they turn and shoot different directions, kind of like a sword form. Nobody would consider that person an expert marksman because they practiced aiming. Might be a useful part of an overall practice, but in and of itself, you've never actually used the weapon to do what it's supposed to do. Same thing is true with your sword. If you've never used the weapon to do what it's designed to do, how can you really say you're conversant in its use? So practicing test cutting on really solid objects, good thick bamboo, mats, other materials, willow branches, all kinds of things. Remember in the past, people didn't order mats online. They had to just gather up local materials to make their grassman. Cutting those targets, whether it was with a big, powerful Liao cut or quick little P cuts, that really also informs your whole practice. It changes your form because now you understand how to apply that power. Where's the acceleration? And you get your edge alignment right. You learn how to move from deflecting with your flat, how to keep that lined up to deliver a cut with genuine authority. So test cutting, something that we brought back here at Great Rodell Center, is an essential part of our practice here. The last thing I'd like to address concerning what's our practice based on, what's the source of it, is that everything we're doing is coming from either the late Ming or the Qing dynasties. We have no material, no manuals, no forms. All we have is maybe a few pictures here and there that are murals, often in tombs, from anything that predates the late Ming. So, and think about that. Paintings in a tomb are not manuals. We don't even know if they're accurate depictions of swordsmen of the period, or if the postures or the movements presented are meant to even be accurate. They're paintings on a wall. There's no reason to assume that a painter is a swordsman and knows the proper stance. So any Chinese swordsmanship that's a recreation that predates the late Ming is at best contrived, and honestly that's just a polite way of saying it's a fantasy. The only things we really have, anything that we can base on, is from the late manuals of the Ming Dynasty and our Qing transmission. Well, thanks everybody for watching. I hope you found this useful. If you did, we always appreciate the subscriptions and thumbs up. Please hit that bell so you hear about the next videos that are coming out. And let us know what other questions you have that you'd like answered. Please write them in below, and we'll do our best to get to them. Until next time, thanks and 再见.